think I can, yeah, set that right there.
Okay.
Okay, today is February 9th, 2016. I'm Susan West. I'm in the village of Avon talking to Denise Gaskins. Denise, can you tell me where you were born, where you grew up?
Well, I was born in Norfolk, Virginia, and I grew up in Chesapeake, out in the country on a small farm when Chesapeake was farmland, or had farms.
Okay.
So, but I grew up there and lived out there for all my life until my husband and I moved down here.
Okay, and what, was it a working farm?
Well, we raised our all our own food. We raised a cow. We put a cow in the freezer every year. We raised hogs and chickens and rabbits to eat, and that kind of thing. So we raised our own food, and we had horses, and I showed horses and stuff. But my father worked in the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, so he really didn't make his money off the farm or any. It was just small, 10 acres, but we had 2 big 5-acre pastures that we raised our own hay, and we fed our animals, and we, butchered.
Fantastic.
Ate what we raised.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But he worked at the shipyard.
Norfolk Naval Shipyard.
What
yeah.
did he do there?
He was supervisor of the Shop 99, and it was, I guess, a temporary services shop. Like when the big ships came in, they would hook up temporary services from the, dry dock to the land lines and that kind of thing.
And did your mom work?
She was a nurse. She worked for a while out down at Virginia Beach General Hospital.
Okay.
So she was a nurse.
Were they from Virginia?
They were. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, both of them were from Virginia.
Okay.
Norfolk.
But your husband was from, he
here.
had family ties.
He actually was
Hatteras.
born in Buxton. My husband was born in Buxton. And both his parents were from Hatteras Island. Okay. His father grew up in Hatteras Village, and his mother grew up here in Avon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were they military? Were they?
Coast Guard.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how did you meet your husband?
Well, my father-in-law was stationed in the Coast Guard in Portsmouth, Virginia. So they were living in Chesapeake. And my husband and I graduated from the same high school, Deep Creek High School.
Okay.
And so I met him, and we started dating in 1971 when he had just graduated and I still was in high school.
Okay.
And we met, and I was real familiar with Hatteras Island because I had spent many, many summers down here camping.
Oh, you had?
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Throughout the early 60s, my father owned his own heating and sheet metal business. And so he would come down here. Sears, a lot of people on Hatteras and Ocracoke would order their heating systems or anything they needed through the Sears Roebuck catalog. So Sears in Norfolk would subcontract the installation out to my father. And so my father would bring all the stuff down here and install their new heating system from, so we spent a lot of time down here because we'd come down with him and camp while he was working on Ocracoke or Hatteras and installing the heating systems. And so my dad actually installed the first central heating system in the Ocracoke keeper's quarters down in Ocracoke.
Really?
Yeah, he said he had to bust through real thick, concrete walls and stuff to get the ductwork through and everything. And so he would stay in the back in the early 60s. They had a sheriff named John Gallup over there on Ocracoke, and he had these little cabins out behind his house, and so we'd stay over there and while Dad worked over there. So
that's great. So you were
I was very familiar with Hatteras and Ocracoke Islands.
Okay.
Because we came down here beginning in the early 60s and, well, all the way through the 60s, but we rode the Oregon Inlet Ferry many times, to get, and then the Ocracoke Ferry, the Hatteras Inlet Ferry. So when I was kids, yeah.
Do you remember that ferry?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember how many cars went on it?
They weren't as large as the ferries that are at Hatteras Inlet now,
Okay.
but I don't know, maybe 20, maybe that many. They weren't quite as large, but they were, but the same system. They.
So after you met your husband and got married, you didn't move down here right away.
No, we didn't, because he went to work in the Norfolk Naval Shipyard as the and he became the supervisor of the heating and the air conditioning, the AC shop.
Okay.
So he became the supervisor of the AC shop in the Norfolk Naval Shipyard there in Portsmouth, and so he was head of the AC department there, or shop there, when we moved down here, and we got married in November of '73, and but we spent all our vacations and lots of weekends down here, and so.
And what year did you move down here then?
Well, he moved down here in May of '86, and started his business, Hatteras Island Air. And so the kids and I, they were in school, and the children and I would come down. We spent all that summer, '86 summer here. But I took him back and put him back in school in Chesapeake, because we wanted to make sure his business could afford us to move down here and support us, basically. And so I would either come down here weekends that year, or he would come up there weekends. And but then the kids and I moved down in '87. As soon as they got out of school in '87.
And did you work in Chesapeake?
Well, not I did hair, but I didn't. I did art shows, but I didn't really work. Outside the home. So I did hair in my house. And
how did you learn to do that?
Do what, hair?
Hair.
Oh, I went to a cosmetology school my junior and senior year of high school.
Okay.
So when I graduated high school, I had a little bit more of the school to do, and then I took my Virginia State Board to, get licensed for cosmetology. And I did work some, right after that. But then once I had children, I did it out of my house and stayed home with the kids.
Okay. And you still do that?
What, hair?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, 42 years of it.
42 years?
Yes, 42 years of doing hair.
And your clients here, are they from all over the island? Or
oh yeah, I have some customers, a man and a woman and her husband, I guess. She comes every week from Edenton.
Oh my goodness.
And then to get her hair done, but they have Oceanfront and Rodanthe. But I also have customers on Ocracoke that I've done for 25 years, and I have customers that come every year when they come on vacation a couple times a year, and that I've done for 20 years, and so they're from all over.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you mentioned when you were still in Chesapeake, you did your art.
Yes, also. I did. Yep.
Tell me about your art, or did you take formal training, or?
Well, I grew up around creative people, and the creativity was, part of my life. I grew up with a ceramic studio in my house. My parents did ceramics and had a room with a kiln and all the molds, where they poured the molds and everything. So, and my parents, my mother, gave classes on how to do ceramics and stuff. And my grandfather was a blacksmith, so we were always with him making things. He was always making stuff. And so, I grew up around, my father was very creative, and we needed something, we made it, kind of thing. So creativity was, I grew up around it. And so I always loved artwork, and always did it growing up and through high school. And then, so I became interested in painting. And so my parents, paid for private painting classes and that kind of thing when I was a teenager and, in high school and stuff.
And was that watercolor?
It was with acrylics. I did acrylics. Okay. And I did acrylics up until about 1984. I started, or 83 or 4, somewhere in there. I took a class with a watercolor artist in Portsmouth. He's a very well-known watercolor artist in Portsmouth, in the Tidewater area, in Virginia, actually. He's a Marine, American Marine Society watercolor artist. He's, very, very well-known. Robert Burnell, yeah. And so I took classes with him at Tidewater Community College, and did week-long workshops in different places where we'd go, the group of us would go off and paint for a week somewhere on the Eastern Shore, or, all over the place, and different. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. And so I studied watercolors. So I've been doing watercolors since, I guess, mid-'80s.
And can you describe to me or explain, do you prefer watercolors to acrylics?
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
Once I found watercolors, I didn't do any, I
Really?
didn't go back to acrylics. Well, I like
What's the difference?
Well, it's watercolors, you don't have white paint. So whatever's white or light in your painting in watercolors is left, the paper is left white, or you mask it out, and so your colors don't get muddied up very bad, and the transparency of the color, you can put just almost a glaze or a wash, or and it's just the colors are so much more vibrant. I feel like watercolors are more vibrant than acrylics. So
are they not as flat as acrylics, or do they show light better?
Yeah, I think like I said, the transparency of them, the brightness shines through the color. It's not such an opaque color.
Okay.
The color's not so opaque and solid, I guess.
Is the brushwork the same, whether it's acrylics?
Well, actually, no, it's not at all. I mean, the only similarities is that you use water with the paint, but the brush strokes, your paper oftentimes is wet when you put the paint on the paper. It's wet, and at different degrees of wetness, or sometimes I dry it with a blow dryer to get it dry enough to put a line on so it doesn't smear or run or anything. So, yeah.
And if someone asked you, Denise, describe your style of painting, how would you describe your art?
Detailed.
Detailed?
Realistic, detailed. Yeah. I often would like to be looser. You see a lot of watercolors that are real loose and washy, kind of thing. And I have a difficult time stopping. I want to add more detail and more detail, and So I think I would describe it like it was a detailed, very detailed, and realistic.
Okay. And subject matter.
Oh,
What do you like to paint?
I love old boats and old fish houses and old houses and wildlife, ducks and geese and that
Have
kind
you
of thing.
always liked painting those type of things?
Yeah, old barns. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I love architecture.
Okay.
And I like to. The older houses have more architectural elements in it. The different things and. So that's what I like, and the beach, and but I guess if my favorite would be old boats, and old fish houses, and that kind of shoreside scenes and that kind of thing.
Well, I've seen some of your work, the print of the harbor here in Avon.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful, and that captures the harbor in Avon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
And you sell your work.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I do.
Have you sold your work for a long time since you started? Or?
I think my first art show selling my work was about 85, 86. About that time, yeah.
And tell me a little bit about art shows.
Well, they're a lot of work, but I enjoyed them when I was doing it. But it takes a lot of setting up and breaking down and that kind of thing, and carrying your paintings in and out and all that. But I enjoyed it because I was able to talk with the people that were enjoying my artwork. So I enjoyed the talking to the public and that kind of thing. So
you mentioned fish houses and boats,
mm-hmm.
and old houses. So obviously, the culture of here in the village of Avon influences.
Oh yeah,
your art.
Yeah. The whole island, this the way of life. Down here, and it's always...
how about the natural environment?
Oh yeah. It's these old trees and the sound side, the marsh grass, and it's great. Yeah, and the skies, the sunsets, they change, they're different every night, and the colors of the sky and sunrises, and
so you could look, say, at the same landscape.
Oh yeah.
And paint that several different ways, probably.
Every day.
It would look
every
different.
Day, because the light hits it different every day, and so your darks and your lights are different every day, the shadows, and then if the sky's red at sunset, the color on the foliage is going to be different every day, and so it's, absolutely. That's
fascinating.
It is.
It really is.
It is. Yeah. It's very... there's plenty of material here for somebody who is creative and wants to, create artwork, and the inspiration is right outside your window. Oftentimes, all you have to do is look out. So.
Your mother-in-law, Libby, did she paint? I know she had the framing shop.
Well, we actually. She did some painting when I showed her how to use the watercolors, and she did a little bit of painting, but she didn't do very much.
Okay.
So her mother, however, Mama Carrie, did quite a bit. So.
And how did she learn?
I taught her how to use watercolors, and
oh, you did?
Yeah, we did some classes.
Oh,
I gave her some classes. Yeah, she was. Fascinated by it. She had done some oils way back when her youngest daughter was in school down here. She did some oils, and Mama Carrie got interested in it back then, did a little bit of oil painting, a little bit of acrylic painting, but never really did a whole lot of it. And so when I moved down here and I painted all the time, she became interested in the watercolors. And because, I mean, they're not near as messy as oils and acrylics and stuff. And so we had some classes, she and I, and
That's
so
fantastic.
we had some good times painting together.
Yeah.
And she was in her late 70s, or I guess 70s, late 70s at that time when she started. And she did a lot of painting between her, I guess 76 and she was about 76, and she painted right on up till she was about 85, pretty hard and steady every day. She painted.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, yeah.
And did she paint in her house? Did she?
Yeah, she did. She had her little spot set up on her front porch area. She called her front, like a sun porch area. And she sat out there painting, and she'd have the Jimmy Swagger playing to the top of as loud as it would go up, and she'd be sitting there painting with her dog down beside her. So
That is fantastic.
yeah.
But her style wasn't anything like your style.
Oh no, totally different. Once she found out how to use the medium, the watercolor medium, she just took off on her own, and she had her own style, which was nothing like mine, which was great. I mean, she had her, and that's the great thing about watercolors. I mean, you can just use it in so many, well, I guess the other mediums too, but it's so flexible. You can do from abstract to very detailed work with it.
Right. And hers wasn't detailed like yours. Can you describe her style?
Hers was very loose, very, her brush strokes were very visible, and she she wasn't confined at all. She was free with her brush strokes, free with her colors, but yet you knew it was a geranium. But I mean it was a very loose geranium.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
it was
for someone in their 70s to take up watercolors.
Yeah,
and to feel like it was okay to
exactly.
do it any way she wanted to.
But no one ever, like, so many people take classes with an artist and they'll say, oh no, you can't paint that flower that color, or you can't paint that house or the whatever. You can't paint it that shape or put it there in your painting or whatever. She never had anyone to tell her that she couldn't do things the way she wanted to do them. So she developed her very own unique painting style, because she wasn't confined to doing it like it was supposed to be done, so to speak. Like someone else felt like it should be done. She developed it, which is wonderful, because it was truly her own style.
That's great.
Yeah, it was.
And some of her artwork was sold here too.
Well, when my mother-in-law and I had the Gaskins Gallery, we sold a lot of Mama Carrie's artwork in there, as well as mine, and yeah.
And did Libby ever sell any of her artwork?
Not very much, because she whatever she painted, we tried to keep ourselves. Because she didn't. Well, she did sell some, but I mean, not very much. Yeah, not very much. So.
Yeah. It's kind of, this is a difficult question, especially since Antoinette works in pottery and you're watercolor. But do you see any similarity between your artwork and your daughter's artwork?
Well, most artists, if you'll really if you really ask them what they started out doing. Most artists go through different mediums, various different. I mean, I did acrylics, I did wood cutting, I did all kinds of different mediums before I found watercolors and stuck with watercolors.
Okay.
Antoinette did. She did watercolors, she did colored pencils, she did jewelry making, she did stained glass, she did all different types. She did glass etching. I mean, you know, there was all different types of things until she found pottery, and pottery was her thing. So most artists go through all different types of mediums until they find what feels right to them. And so once I found watercolors, that's what felt right to me. And once she found pottery, that clay in her hands, that felt right to her. So that's where her creativity worked the best. Although her drawings in colored pencil, her paintings were good, her stained glass was good, but none of it stuck until she found pottery. And it's the same way with me with watercolors. I've been exposed to many, many different. I took a basket weaving class. I've done all different types of creative things, but until I, found watercolors, nothing really stuck to where that's what I wanted to continue to do.
So, here's another tough question. What is this need to create stuff? I mean, there are an awful lot of people who go through life and they don't, make art. Well, why is that important?
I think, like I said, I was exposed to it growing up, but I think it's even more than that. If you are a maker, if creating things it's almost in your genes. It's almost genetic, but yet if you're exposed to it all your life, it comes so natural to you to be creative, and your brain almost works overtime thinking of things that you can create or make or paint or so it's in your genes or in your makeup. I don't know how else to explain it.
It's interesting to me because, some people are driven to create, and then others...
Well, there's so many forms of creativity. There's, these women down here on the island that make quilts, and there were quilting groups from way back. That's creativity. That's creating. Right. That's artwork. Right. The men on the island that carved decoys, that was, they had to for their hunting, but it was also creative.
Exactly.
Juices there. It's just it goes way back. I mean, there's all different types of creativity.
Right. So it could be
functional,
something you use.
Oh, absolutely. I made wedding gowns, and I sewed, when the children were little, I did a lot of sewing, and so, that in itself is creative. It's, there's so many different types of it, but I find that, most people that are creative, they've done a lot of different things before and if it's an artist that's selling their artwork, they've done a lot of different mediums before they got to what they're selling.
Before they found sort of their niche or what they like working
exactly
with.
Yes.
Changing the subject a little bit. You've lived here a pretty long time, and you visited here before then. What major storms have you experienced here?
Oh, golly. Well, in 1985, Hurricane Gloria came through here, And so, soon as that happened, it flooded my husband's grandparents' home here. And so he and I packed up from Chesapeake and came down and helped with the cleanup. So that was my first experience cleaning up from a damage from a hurricane. And then I guess our first big one was Emily in '93.
And was that a bad one?
That was very, very bad. Emily did a lot of damage. A lot of damage here in Avon Village and a lot of damage on the island from Avon south. And, but even before Emily, there was a March 13th, 1993 storm that flooded. It came up the Sound and it flooded homes in Rodanthe Waves and Salvo and Avon. So that was in March 93.
So the same year as that.
And a lot of homes in Avon were flooded then in March of 93, March 13th. And then they got their homes put back together, and in August, the end of August that same year, they got flooded again with Hurricane Emily. So that was pretty devastating for the island.
And more and more of the older homes have been raised up.
Lots of them, including mine.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my home. We raised it in 2007. Okay. It was, my husband and I bought his uncle's house.
Okay.
And it had been flooded in Gloria and Emily both flooded the house. And then, so he redid it every time, redone the floors and the walls and everything. And then we bought it in 95, and it hadn't been flooded. It wasn't flooded after that, after we bought it. It came close, but it never came in it. But we had always said that we were going to get it raised as soon as we could get it raised.
Is it a real old house?
The house was built in 1975. His uncle built it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had it raised up as soon as you could.
Then. Yeah, as soon as we could. It's not an inexpensive thing to do, but
I'm sure it costs. But worth it. It's a good investment.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so Emily in 93.
And then all the storms since then. I've been right here for Bob and Isabel, and of course Irene was very, very damaging, in 2011 for us here in Avon and the northern villages. So Hurricane Irene was pretty bad. It was even worse, I think it was even worse than Emily as far as the damage that it did. Hurricane Irene, and that was 2011.
Well, tell me, when you hear a storm is making its way towards Hatteras Island,
Yeah.
Are you frightened or do you worry?
No, not really. I mean, if you're smart and you prepare the best you can, I mean, you don't do stupid stuff. I mean, you don't go out in the middle of the storm and, take unnecessary chances. But if you're smart and you prepare and you get ready, no, I'm not frightened. I don't mind a storm. I'm not afraid of thunderstorms or anything like that. Some people are,
right.
But I don't mind a storm. It's, so as long as I know all my children and grandchildren are safe, I don't mind a bit. So.
Right. Well, tell me about Irene. Did you anticipate that it was going to be as bad as it was?
I didn't really. I didn't really realize. It looked like it would be. It could be a lot of townside flooding, the way it came in and everything. Of course, you'd never know how much, but yeah, it was. It was a bad one. So.
A lot of damage here in the village.
Well, mostly it's the sound tide sound tide that did the damage that was done from the sound tide.
Okay.
So,
Were a lot of homes flooded?
yes, yeah, a lot of homes. Not as many in Avon as there were up in Rodanthe Ways and Salvo, but I think a lot of the houses in Avon had been raised. So had they not been raised, there would have been just as many, but there was still quite a few in Avon. Quite a few, yes, quite a few. My son had, a foot of water in his house, so.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so they had to move out and redo his house, and so we scraped mud out of his house right after it happened. So.
Tell me what happened over at the fire station after Irene.
Oh my
that
goodness.
was sort of the hub.
That was Avon Volunteer Fire Department was fantastic. Right after the storm, there wasn't any phone service. So my first concern is to let my family in Virginia know that we're okay. So I go up there, and those guys were busy as they could be, and I made a phone call, and I offered to cook them something to eat, and they said, no, it's okay, and they're busy.
And those are the
volunteer firemen. It was Kenny Bright and Jan Laskow at that time. And so I made my phone call, and I came back home, and Antoinette walked up there. It was, they had power at the fire department. They had their generator on. And so and it was hot. And so a lot of the village kids were up at the fire department watching TV. Sure. So the kids were hanging out up there, and the volunteer firemen were doing, what they had to do and everything. So I came home, and Antoinette had gone up there to check on the kids, and she said, she came back and she said, Mom, there were some people looking for some food up there. And then I said, oh, okay. And so then a girl that goes to church with me, Angela Lofty, she goes up there, and she comes back to my house, and she says, Denise, what are we going to do to feed all these people? There's people looking for food. And I said, all right. And so I went to church, because we had a pantry at church, and we had food at church, because we were doing community dinners at church, and so we had some food in the...
And which church?
St. John's United Methodist Church, which was flooded.
Oh, it was?
Oh, yeah. We had, St. John's United Methodist Church had about 8 inches of water in the church. So we had it raised after that, too, but... So it was flooded. So I went in there, and I got what we had there, and so we had some hamburger in the freezer and some different stuff. So anyway, so I went up there, and I told the firemen, I said, all right, I'm cooking dinner here. Just get the word out that we're going to have a dinner at the fire department tonight. And so Antoinette and her husband Brian, my son Tater, and my niece Carrie, and I just got a group of us together, and Angela Lofty, and I think Jennifer Harmon. The first night, even my nephew Liam was in there opening cans, and we all got in that kitchen, and we cooked hamburger steak with gravy and mashed potatoes and green beans, and I don't know, we put on a big dinner that night, and about 125 people came and ate that first night. Well, by the second day, we were feeding over 300 people 3 meals a day.
Oh my goodness.
By the second day.
Because people had no power.
No power. The food line was closed. They weren't they couldn't cook. The power was out, so a lot of their food was spoiled, and so we ended up feeding over a 15-day period. We ended up feeding 10,500 meals.
Oh my goodness!
That's 3 meals a day. So I would show up there. We would all show up. And I'd be up there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we'd start breakfast. And then we'd clean up from breakfast and we'd start lunch. And we'd clean up from lunch and we'd start dinner. So we had, and so, but I'd say by the third day, they had called Salvation Army was on its way by the third day. And so we had already been feeding over 300 people every meal. So they just joined in with us and helped us, and we just continued. And I think our largest numbers was one night we did 600 for dinner. Well, the restaurants found out we were doing it, and the restaurants in the village in Avon were all geared up for Labor Day weekend. So their walk-ins were full of food. Their walk-in freezers and everything were full of food, and all the restaurants had all kinds of food in for the holiday weekend and everything for the week, and no customers, and weren't going to get any customers.
Right.
So they were bringing us food. We ended up having Sears sent down an extra refrigerator and an extra freezer for us for a very low cost. And we had, in the fire department has a commercial size freezer and a commercial size refrigerator, and they were packed.
Oh.
So, I mean, everybody was giving us their food. And so we had crab meat, we had shrimp, we had fish, we had clams. We made big pots of chowders, and I mean, we were eating good. King crab legs, you know.
Everything they couldn't use.
Yeah, everybody was saying that this is the best food I've ever had after a hurricane. So, but
I'm sure for like the groups like the Salvation Army must have been impressed.
Oh, they
when
were.
They arrived.
They were.
Saw that you all had this operation going.
Antoinette is such an organized person that she had a sign-up sheet by the third day. She had a sign-up sheet on the door of the kitchen, and people could sign up for what shift they wanted to come in, and if they wanted to come in, and we had cleaners signed up, we had dishwashers signed up, we had, so Antoinette had organized all that, and then it wasn't long after that the chef from Catch 55, Seth, came in and started helping cook, and Jomi Price, she came in and started helping.
Are you used to cooking for large numbers of people?
Yeah, but no, I mean,
That didn't phase you?
No, I had 42 people at my house for Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, and that was just family.
Okay.
So I mean, but right now we do community dinners at the church in the wintertime, and we have 100 people every Thursday night for a free big community dinner, and
that's great.
Yeah, so cook for big numbers a lot.
And are you very involved in your church?
Yes, very involved. Yeah, that's my social life.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do the dinners there, and do they have other activities and all?
Well, we have United Methodist Women, and that.
Okay.
So I'm part of that as well.
And what does that group do? What do they do?
Well, we have different missions that we'll help out with, and do things like that. So, thank you.
Who's Keeler?
Home.
Oh.
Yeah.
Who's your dog?
My dog. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking about food, last week at the Coastal Voices event at the fire station, we had great Hatteras Island clam chowder that you and Antoinette made.
Yeah. Yes, we did.
Can you share that recipe or tell me the ingredients that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You may just tell you what we did?
Yeah.
Well, fried out salt pork first, cut it up and, chop it up and fried out the salt pork. And then sauteed the onions in the salt pork grease.
Okay.
And then peeled 10 pounds of potatoes. And, we made a big pot full, so, it was huge. And probably 100 clams went into it. So, but we, had clam juice, all the juice saved all that. So of course we sauteed the onions and put the clam juice in there, and cooked the potatoes in the clam juice and added a little bit of water to that, and then the clams went in, and I think that was it. After that.
Do you make any other special local dishes with local seafood?
Well, I do every year at Day at the Docks we sell shrimp chowder. I make shrimp chowder.
And do you make that the same way you make the clam chowder?
Not quite, but we do the salt pork and the onions and potatoes, but also put butter beans and corn in there, and a can of tomato sauce in the shrimp.
Okay.
So, yeah. But I make my broth, for that I peel all my shrimp, and then I boil the shrimp skins to make my broth for the chowder, like that instead, so it's very shrimpy tasting.
Yeah. Do you eat a lot of fish or seafood?
Yeah, I do, as much as I can. Yeah.
Would you want to live any other place besides Kankakee?
No.
Well, what is it about here that you like?
Well, it's home. It's home, and my children are here, and my grandchildren are here, and where I grew up in Chesapeake, out in in the country on the small farm, it's still there, and my mother and my sister are still there, but it's nothing like it was when I was growing up there. But it's the area isn't, and it was a wonderful childhood growing up there. But this has become. But back when we were coming down here, in the 60s, when I was a child, coming to the island, I always liked it better than my brother and sister liked it anyway. So, I always felt like I was supposed to be here back then, all through the 60s and 70s. It's just, I always had a special feeling once I crossed Oregon Inlet. It was just always, it's hard to describe, but it was like I'd take a deep breath and I was home. Right. So.
And can you describe or explain what makes Avon special and unique?
Well, I think being back here in the village, in the old village, and when I moved down here, my husband's grandmother, Mom Carrie, lived next door to us over here, and she taught me so much about the village, the people that lived in the village, the people on the island, so I'd say, Mama Carrie, I just met this lady and her name is so-and-so. Now, how is she connected to us? And so Mama Carrie would go through the family tree and tell me how she was connected. And so it was, and I love the history of the island and just the way of life, on the island. And so I don't know. I don't think I'd ever move.
You were probably just meant to be here.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Going back for a minute to storms, did you ever hear anything from the older people about how people prepared for Well, they didn't even know that storms were coming like we know
Well,
now.
they didn't know how bad or anything. They knew, they felt it more. They watched the, they didn't know near as far ahead of time as we did, but they knew that. Like my husband's Mama Carrie used to say, it feels stormy. It feels like a storm. It was just the humidity and the heat and the way it felt. She would say, it feels like a storm. And so, but she used to talk about getting ropes and life jackets and stuff, and I know when we went when we weathered Hurricane Emily, we were at her house.
Oh,
and she had a upstairs downstairs. We went to her house to stay during the storm with her because she wasn't going to go anywhere, so and she was elderly, and so my husband and my son and I went over there, and the girls left the island, and then another friend was there, and we went upstairs. After the water started coming in the house to my knees, I went upstairs too, and so anyway, we ran around picking up stuff as fast as we could when we saw the water was coming. And so, but we were standing upstairs looking out over the marsh, out towards the sound, and she's looking, and we see this big wall of water coming, and she says, "My Lord, it looks like the 44 storm." So the 1944 storm was always the storm that the old timers talked about around here, because a lot of the homes in the village, in Avon Village, Kennekeep Village, some of them, the smaller homes, floated all the way over to the ocean.
Oh,
from the village all the way into the ocean and to the beach. And their house, actually, the house we were in, had floated away in the 44 storm, and the Red Cross brought it back and put it where it was. So we're standing there looking out over the marsh, and she said, and I knew that the house had already floated in the 44 storm, and she says, "My Lord, it looks like the 44 storm." And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, where's the life jacket?
Really?
I hope we don't float.
Oh,
but
geez.
you just open the doors and let the water come in, and or either way back they had after the house floated and came back, they always kept an axe in the closet and things like that, so they could bust a hole in the floor if they needed to. But we just opened doors and let the water come in, and so
that must have been hard on all of you, but especially on her.
It was very hard on her. It aged her. The storm aged her, because she had gone through so many and lost so much that, she lost more stuff, in Emily, and she was older, and it was very sad to see how much the stress of that storm aged her after that. So
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure, especially losing things that were important to her.
Yeah.
Well, Denise, I appreciate your time this afternoon.
Oh,
Is
sure.
there anything else you want to add?
I can't think of anything. I think you've asked,
Okay. Well, good.
No.
Well, I really appreciate your time.
Well,
This is
you're
great.
certainly welcome. I enjoyed it. That was fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.